You came to coom, but I come to kill. Fear me, and loot me, for I am no less deadly than I am kawaii. Trust me, I'm under 18. Over. I meant over. I meant to say over. This is a serious game. Hi, I'm Crichton. Welcome back to over half a year since I last uploaded. And this is Metal Gear Solid 5, Phantom Pain, a game that has nothing to do with metals, gears, solids, fifths, phantoms, or pain, nor does it have anything to do with the fallacy of division. If you have not turned off the video past that joke, I will assume you're either a philosopher or passionate about gaming criticism. Either way, what a nerd, lol. I know just because I don't have a lens, it does not mean I'm incapable of projecting. So let us take a dive into a very ambitious and very unique game, a title that concludes a series so classic it started way back in the 1980s. And since then it has spawned such a complex story that the first title PC players got to enjoy in over a decade is also the last one in the series. Who's that important character, you ask? I have no idea, because you will find less exclusivity in an Amish marriage than the PlayStation Store. So if you want to learn how this title measures up as a Kojima game or as part of the Metal Gear series, the only answer I can give you is, it's not an exclusive. For this reason I will be reviewing the Phantom Pain mostly in isolation from its predecessors. So if you want to learn if it is worth your time as a game that stands on its own, you have come to the right place. And if you want to know why I said this in my Far Cry 4 video, would I recommend it over Far Cry 5? Probably, since I do not even plan on playing Far Cry 5. But I would not recommend it over Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. Stick around and you'll find out. So, Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, also known as MGS. PP? It is an open-world stealth game with an open-ended approach to situations, including an action alternative, some light base building, a mix of realism and fantasy, and a B-movie tier story that is surprisingly elaborate. There's plenty to see in this one, including gruff military dudes, science fiction enemies, mad scientists, ninja turtles, and stuttering anime girls.
Thank you.
And if that doesn't get your attention, then I'm sure this will. Let's begin. Visually, Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain looks amazing. Yes, it came out in 2015, but its quality seems to have remained constant throughout the years. Part of this is due to its excellent execution, and part of it is due to excellent design choices, not least the attention to detail, which, to put simply, accounts for a visual menagerie self-contained in an effective spectrum of unparalleled levels of whoa, to add some eloquence. Be it the rocky desert with its calm, spotless blue sky, complementing by contrast the scorching sharp rocks underneath, or an African jungle with its exotic mix of bright open green and thick foliage with a good deal of god rays to add to the mix. Night or day, dirt, grass or concrete, the environments look authentic and perfectly representative of the visual appearance of their supposed real-life counterparts. We're looking for two words here. The first is variety. In spite of being a desert and a jungle, the Phantom Pain manages to make its maps look diverse. There is very little in the sense of visual monotony here, which is impressive considering its subject matter is mostly sand and grass. While not necessarily inviting exploration, these landscapes are a sight to behold. If not always up close, then definitely from afar is a complete picture of the setting. The other word is authenticity. The Phantom Pain offers geographically and historically believable environments built around the framework of an open-world game. These same environments flow well from one gameplay setting to the next, allowing for ample opportunity of approach in stealth and combat alike. The environments are designed in a way that complements the gameplay, and neither their size nor their detail hinders the pacing. Moreover, the design exhausts more or less all of what you can ascribe to the landscapes being depicted here. Savanna grass, rocky hills, abandoned settlements, and other things that are coarse and rough and get everywhere. And here you might have noticed how all the animations look, especially if you listen to some of the sound effects that complement them. Sprinting in particular is probably one of the most satisfying depictions of the real thing I've seen in a game. It's not Mirror's Edge, but it's definitely an I missed the bus again but I'm not giving up kind of presentation. The animation quality is so competent it can make crawling on the ground look fun. You'll also notice that you can see knocked out enemies breathing, and when you order your dog companion to kill an enemy, it takes out a knife. Because why use your canines just because you're a canine? And yes, it does look silly, but so does running around inside of a cardboard box. Metal Gear is not about grounded realism, but a combination between grounded realism and whatever they were thinking when they designed this.
Side-op completed.
Even minute things like the skybox can be impressively detailed. It is sublime details like these that make you realize that this is art. If I zoom in on the far horizon, you can even see the subtle way stars begin to appear in the dusk sky. It is above the worldly. It is not about money. It is not about fame. It is not about sex. As I was saying, it is not about money and it is not about fame. Okay, let us not beat around the bush, because this game does not beat around the meat. While the tone is mostly militaristic and gruff, it definitely tries to maximize on any part it can sexualize, which is virtually any part that features a female character. And much like with the Old Testament, you will encounter a lot more ass than you'd expect for the setting. Now, to be fair, for the most part it is optional. You should be able to avoid most of these kinds of scenes, but doing so will bar you from some cutscenes and an entire side plot. So the definitive experience does include this aesthetically pointless sexualization. To the game's defense, it is not nearly as brazen as it is in most other games. You will see a lot more of this element in something like GTA or Cyberpunk. So here, it is mostly a problem of incongruity rather than offensive sexuality. It is like the Lord of the Rings but with Warcraft elves. They could have done better, but it does not actually hurt the game. And for what it's worth, the lengths the game goes to justify it with ad hoc contrivances can somewhat contribute to the B-movie feel of the setting. She is naked to breathe, not to breed. And this element of quirky science fiction is an integral part of the game, and it happens to make for a nice segue into the story. So let me set up the premise without giving away anything in context. The gist of the setting is that it is the Cold War and there are new technologies on the rise that could potentially tip the balance. The former is the realistic part, as you fight in proxy wars that take place in the Middle East and Africa, and the latter is science fiction. Some more fiction and science, but entertaining all the same. Some things go down at the beginning of the game and you end up running your own private military base. You get to develop this same base as you pursue several plots concerning your former crew and nascent military technologies that eventually converge into a global baseless conspiracy. For the most part, it does a good job telling its story. There is even a reveal in the sci-fi element that I found rather impressive in its creativity. I won't give it away here, but I'd just like to mention that in spite of criticism over how silly it sounds to some, I can say with confidence that it is actually grounded in scientifically viable theory. Note, I did not say possible, only viable. That's why it is called science fiction. So, to move on with the narrative, I think it is overall well done. It mixes the realistic Cold War feel in with the often over-the-top fiction well enough, and it keeps you interested in seeing the story to its conclusion. Where it fails is in the more dramatic, emotional elements, which seem rather forced or even out of place at times. This can end up giving the game a melodramatic or even pretentious feel. When it lands, it can be to great effect. When it does not...
Oh no! Cringe!
Another setback is that a lot of the story is told through cassette tapes, because nothing says visual storytelling as an audiobook. There's a lot to this story and not much space to tell it, so this problem is mostly a result of ambition, not laziness. But it does end up hurting the narrative, especially if you decide to skip them. Where the narrative does not suffer, surprisingly enough, is in its relation to previous titles in the series, or how it goes about informing the player of relevant lore. While it does assume you already know who these characters are, it gives you just enough information to feel comfortable even as a newcomer. Since this is part of the prequels, there are only a handful of important references to the rest of the series. Remember how I said not to mind the unnecessary sexual innuendo? Well, you'd better keep not minding it, because in come Naked Snake, Solid Snake, and Liquid Snake. No, they're not the three stages of a one-sided take on human reproduction, but important characters. Namely, the original, also known as Big Boss, a good clone who happens to be solid, and a not-so-good clone, who is obviously not quite as solid at the same temperature. There is also a Venom Snake who died parading as Big Boss in the NES game, but that's probably beside the point. Then there is a shifty agent called Revolver Ocelot, because Magnum Caracol was already taken. And finally, you have Miller, an ally who is there just to suffer. That is the main cast as far as new players are concerned. The story builds up from there, and other bits of deep lore are not quite as important to know beforehand. While I do advise looking up a primer if you want to play this, I should emphasize that you do not really need one. The game will get you up to pace on a need-to-know basis. So that's the premise. Cold War, things go down, private militaries, and one-eyed snakes. You will learn about the morality of combat, nuclear armament, betrayal, tough choices, and photosynthesis. It may not be the most consistently well-told story, but it is fun and creative with the occasional cool revelation. So far, it is the only game I know to have tackled linguistic relativism in its plot. It is an overall enjoyable experience, for which I will say that, in both presentation and story alike, the world of Metal Gear Solid 5 is a world I believe is worth visiting. From an artistic standpoint, it is perfectly competent. Which is not to say it is without its flaws. You know, sometimes you're impressed at the destructibility of some objects, only to realize that we haven't really moved much past the late 2000s in that regard. There used to be a time when explosions actually had an effect on the world around them. Sometimes AI behavior can account for scenarios that look weird on screen. And as impressively fluent as some animations look, still others can look like those fake Aikido moves that only work if your partner cooperates. Yeah, can you turn around for me please? I want to do like that cool Batman chokehold thing. Just like that, yeah, thanks. Okay, so if I don't do anything violent like right now, people might get the wrong impression about us, so... Still, I wouldn't hold nitpickings like these against the game. It doesn't make much sense to argue that, since almost perfect, therefore not perfect, and consequently ugly, unless she rejects you. In spite of the occasional flaws, some more occasional than others, I stand by the opinion that the Phantom Pain carries itself very well for what it wants to present, in visuals and story alike. And it does so with performance that overshadows the majority of its contemporaries. A 7th Gen i5 and a 6GB 1060 can max it out at 1080 resolution without hitches. While the recommended system requirements for older GPUs are a bit higher, an average contemporary system will do much better, so the performance gets a solid pass. The looks-to-performance ratio is very nearly perfect. Maybe I should have given the graphics a lower score. This character model is low poly as hell. It looks like a balloon, the damn thing. Oh, it was a balloon. The environments in Phantom Pain successfully bridge the gap between the real world and gameplay necessities. They avoid the clutter of the former and the rigidness of the latter. The animation quality accounts for a pleasing display of movements. Attention to detail is very much real. The art style, though sometimes bizarre, is simultaneously unique and authentic to the real world. The story is fun, although not without its flaws, and as long as you like either Cold War settings or science fiction plots, it should have at least something to keep you engaged. So the art is good, we've settled that. But every now and then people ask me,
What about the game, Duke? Was it any good?
well, after 10 thrilling months it better be. Okay, so, do you enjoy fast-paced, action-packed suspense-laden dynamics of a Doom clone Quake-like boomer shooter rip-and-tear simulator fighting hectic battles against hordes in arena-style combat chess? Well then. Some people call games who crawl on the floor like a pathetic worm boring. Not me. I call them relatable. That sounds like a self-deprecating joke, but there's more truth to it than meets the eye. Real life is a lot like a stealth game. It is considered common wisdom that one ought to keep their head low or stay below the radar. In fact, it is considered proper etiquette that you keep your feelings to yourself. You're free to hold any opinion, but you'd better not word it. And breaking this norm is considered not just maladaptation, but also a weakness. It gets a lot of eyes on you, and none of them mean you good. A big part of social life revolves around hiding, and the higher up in society you go, the more this becomes apparent. At the bottom of the ladder, you hide your insecurities. At the top of the ladder, you hide tax information. Just as shooters appease your impulse to fight, so do stealth games reflect the notion that there is virtue in hiding. And yet, it is not out of cowardice that we like them. On the contrary, we like them because they give us a fighting chance. Though we spend most of our time in the shadows, when the time is right, we do make a difference. Big or small, we'd like to believe that what we do actually matters. And we also know that it is not imperative that anyone finds out. You can be just as good from the shadows as you can be from the spotlight. So you move on to romanticize this. Nobody needs to know, and consequently nobody should know. No alarms raised, never spotted, and without a trace other than the effect itself. And that is how I see the appeal of the stealth genre. The protagonist is comparatively weak, they must keep their actions secret, and even out the odds not by overcoming these facts, but by making the most of them. I am not immune to bullets, but I don't need to be if you can't see me. I don't need armor, I need a cloaking device. And a big titty got G-feet. Perchance. So how does the Phantom Pain approach this core necessity I've defined? The short answer is very well, and in case you haven't played it, there's a twist coming. Now the concept of stealth is driven by two opposites, the effect of our work, and a necessity to remain unseen. And so, a good stealth game balances these two, hiding and acting. On the one hand, you need to remain unseen. On the other, you need to take action. They are the opposites of each other, because excelling at once means neglecting the other. Yes, it is safer to stay in the dark, but your objective requires that you take action. Conversely, trying to do anything exposes you to potential failure. It is the gaming equivalent of an introvert at a party, but with checkpoints. It is your ability to influence this nothing ventured, nothing lost challenge that makes up the appeal of the genre. So in order to implement this, the Phantom Pain ensures to go an extra mile in its stealth mechanics. On the one hand, you have the basics. Lighting, stance, and movement speed are the main determiners, including the sounds you produce. But then you have subtler things like the terrain on which you stand and camouflage you wear. And in addition to this, you can hide in boxes. And yes, Coomer bait is a viable tactic. They may not be major mechanics, but in addition to already solid gameplay, they do add for a bit of uniqueness within that basic structure. The second thing a good stealth game should cover are the abilities it gives you to even things out. Some give you tools, others give you magic, and some give you the middle finger. The Phantom Pain offers just about anything covered but similar to the stealth genre, from suppressors and simple distractions to invisibility and the power of Zeus.
Let the heavens rage!
It is even lenient enough to run in slow motion the moment somebody spots you, to give you one more chance to correct your mistake. And this can be a special ability on its own. At times I try to get caught on purpose just so I can do this. In case you're wondering, it is enabled by default, but you can turn it off if you don't want it. Insofar as these two elements are concerned, the Phantom Pain is very competent at stealth. For a game that is about sneaking, it imitates sneaking perfectly well. And for a game that is about bipedal flamethrowers, it does that respectively well too. While it is definitely built around stealth and rewards a non-lethal approach, the Phantom Pain also offers an impressive array of flawed methods for a game that is built exclusively around being quiet. It is absolutely entirely stealth in its quality and absolutely not quite entirely stealth in its diversity. Imagine Splinter Cell, but it's open world and also third-person Far Cry. And bipedal flamethrowers. It is in this third element that the Phantom Pain truly stands out. It has the twist I mentioned. An exceptionally good stealth game ought to give the player the chance to get out of a bad situation whenever they make a mistake. Not just generous checkpoints, mind you, but an actual fighting chance. Some let you escape and others let you fight and then escape. The Phantom Pain rather impressively lets you fight and then stop fighting once you've killed everybody. Not only is combat a viable backup option, but it is entirely possible to go full Rambo if you so desire. You can take about as much damage as the average military shooter protagonist, so if you choose to play it as a shooter, that is pretty much what it feels like the newer Battlefield titles but in third person. And actually good. And the shooting is not a bare-bones hit-scanning gallery either. The Phantom Pain treats the gunplay with respect. You get a lot of weapons at your disposal, lethal and non-lethal. You can carry up to 3 at a time, and you can swap them out whenever you feel like calling in for a drop. It is an impressively sized arsenal. While the optimal loadout is pretty much what you would expect from a military shooter, this does not mean that all other weapons are inherently inferior. Surprisingly, this is one of the few military games that does not nerf shotguns to uselessness. They're still close range, but they cover much more believable distances. What I especially like is the fact that bullets behave like projectiles, so depending on the conditions, you'll need to compensate for movement and distance. This makes sniping more challenging than it is in other games, and in that, it is also a much more engaging approach. Instead of an easy mode where you click on people's heads, you actually need to consider how and where you aim. You take your time before you take the shot. And notice what happens when the enemy realizes there is a sniper somewhere in the distance. They send out a flare and begin a mortar raid. And no, it is not a scripted bombardment. I can actually take out the operator, and the artillery seizes. The enemy squad behaves like an actual squad. Enemies in the Phantom Pain adapt to your playstyle. If you engage in combat a lot, you will eventually see increased presence of heavy troops. If you like to sneak around at night, they will begin to use night vision goggles, and if you go for headshots, they will begin to wear helmets. In this sense, it is similar to Dishonored in how the nature of the challenge changes depending on your preferred approach. If you want it to be sneaky, now you'll need to be extra sneaky. And if you want it to aim at small targets, now you'll need to aim at even smaller targets. But if you don't want to deal with any of that, because you just can't be bothered to sneak, snipe, or shoot, you can ask for help from the skies. Now that I mention this, the Phantom Pain begins to take on a shape that is not just the sandbox Splinter Cell, but it actually reminds me a lot of the old Delta Force games. For those who don't know, and by that I mean 90% of the people watching this, Delta Force were an old tactical shooter series, and they might have actually pioneered what we today understand as the modern military shooter. The early entries let you select a loadout and set you out into open levels to carry out objectives in whatever manner you see fit. It had action, stealth sniping, combat at all ranges, and I don't feel like fighting these people. Would you kindly bomb them for me? Thank you. And this combination of open levels and a large military arsenal, especially with projectile bullets and the artillery, seems to be very close to what the sandbox world of the Phantom Pain depicts as well. So there you have it, Phantom Force. In case you're interested, by the way, they're good games, but they're seriously dated. If you can tolerate old games, they're unique enough to be worth an attempted playthrough, but between the graphics and the AI, they don't really hold up today. With that said, I've begun to see the Phantom Pain as some kind of indirect descendant to this format, though probably not deliberately. It seems as though it offers a format similar to what a modern Delta Force game would be like, with superior graphics, better artillery, and tanks. Now, back on topic. To help you in your quest, you have companions, therefore in total, but the horse becomes rather obsolete early on, and the walker is mostly a gimmick. So for the most part, it will be a choice between the dog and the human. Now, the former is arguably the better of the two, because it can sniff out enemies and supplies in a radius. It makes things much easier if you want to go in sneaky peeky-like. You can also distract or eliminate enemies, and you can pet it, because it's wholesome. Quiet, on the other hand, is a sniper used either for precision elimination or combat. I rather like the take aim command, which makes her focus on a specific enemy and hold her fire until you shoot first. This kind of simultaneous dual elimination adds an extra layer to the tactical stealth side of the game. When it works, it is an unscripted version of old Ghillie Dub from Modern Warfare. That is only one of several unique uses of this character, which is not to say that the other two companions are useless. Unlike Quiet, you do not need mods to ride the horse. Fast transport and epic animations are but a part of the horse's versatility, but I'll let you discover the rest on your own. And though D-Walker might be mostly a gimmick, it is not just a gimmick. It's a car gun stealth tranquilizer kind of mech. Yes, all four, plus flamethrowers. They all have their place in the game, especially in specific missions. It's just that for the most part, it is a choice between a dog and a waifu, and you can only have one at a time. Unless... And this combination of weaponry and companions is more than enough for waging war in a world which global war waging is exactly what you're waging a world war against. But there is one more mechanic I need to cover: base building. Character progression in this game is tied to leveling up your gear, and leveling up your gear is tied to developing your base, which is in itself tied to the kinds of people you have working there and the level of the relevant skills. The more skilled people you have in a field, the more you can advance in that field, and consequently the more gear you get at your disposal. You buy these upgrades with credits or resources you collect in the open world. This makes plundering enemy bases for resources an important part of the gameplay loop. Sometimes your pacifism takes a backseat to slaughtering everybody for oil and a bit of metal, because better silencers don't just grow in trees. And you can quote me on that. Now this could be ludonarrative dissonance, but it could also be some kind of advanced ludonarrative hyperharmony, because saving the world requires getting your hands dirty. It is not just about your own ideals, or even your own safety for that matter. It matters little what you do or how you do it. It is only important that you get results, that you do it fast, that you get there fast, and it matters that... flowers. It matters that you get the flowers. If your game does not have compulsive florism, is it even an open world game? So, once you've taken care of resources, you need to upgrade your base facilities and stuff them with quality personnel. So you travel to the third world, abduct people, and make them spend the rest of their lives in forced labor abroad. I'm not kidding, that's how it works. The scanner tells you if they're proficient in anything, and that determines their fate. If they don't happen to have the skills you're looking for, you kill them. Because how else am I supposed to save humanity? I'm the good guy. And it is not like you can avoid doing this. There are missions where you're tasked with eliminating targets and knocking them out does not count. You either kill them or you extract them to your base. So since you can't have them taking up the place of more skilled workers, there is only one way to finish the mission. Which really is a pity because it ruins what is otherwise a very good lethal versus non-lethal system, with non-lethal being rewarded but significantly more difficult and lethal being easier but costing potential manpower. Unless the people in question are of no use to you. Then it is okay to kill them. And a whole system of people collecting gets tedious after a while because as you progress it becomes increasingly grindy, and not in the good way. This was designed most likely in order to promote the multiplayer mode in which not everybody would be willing to spend time, myself included. So unless you go out of your way to collect proficient workers, you might end up stuck with mid-game items in the late game. While it is not nearly as bad as what Shadow of War did, it still feels like a cheap move. While we're in the mandatory flaws section, I should also mention that the loadout system is a bit constrictive in that it has strict requirements for what qualifies as a primary or as a secondary weapon. So if you want to use a sniper rifle and a rocket launcher for instance, which sounds like it would be an optimal loadout, the game will not let you since they both count as secondary weapons. In turn, if you want to engage in long-range combat but then you see a helicopter, you'll need to navigate the menu, ask for a drop, and then wait for it. It doesn't sound too bad on paper, but it does get annoying the more you have to do it. Add to this the fact that the automatic save system in free roam saves location and inventory but not always progress, and you could end up swapping gear several times per restarting during the side quest. Inventory is underutilized overall. Yes, the gadgets are cool, but for the most part I did not use them. In fact, the game is designed to be completable without any inventory items, which turns gadgets into gimmicks more so than an actual mechanic. You would need to go out of your way to use anything other than a silenced weapon. The large weapons arsenal is also an illusion to an extent. There is one weapon in each category that is superior to the rest, so I see no point in upgrading the AK when the so-called UN is clearly the better weapon. And why would I need a scoped double-barrel shotgun? While we're there is really only one loadout that is consistently good, an assault rifle, a situational secondary, and a non-lethal pistol. Anything else is going to be crippling yourself for the sake of variety. There is no reason to use an SMG or an LMG or a non-lethal shotgun. Yes, this game has non-lethal shotguns. But why would I need it when I can just use my non-lethal pistol to much better effect? It is the Far Cry illusion of selection I mentioned back in 2019. The rigidness and scoring can also be detrimental to the experience. It rewards completing missions quickly, going non-lethal, and abstaining from artillery or cloaking. And here's the problem with that. Not only does the speed requirement discourage patient planning in favor of going in blind, but the stipulation and method punishes the player for having fun. You cannot go invisible, you cannot order artillery, and you'd best not use your weapons, cool though they might look. I understand what they were going for, but they really didn't need to go that far. Deus Ex promoted non-lethal stealth, but it never punished the player for making full use of their arsenal, so it was perfectly viable to pull off the kinds of maneuvers befitting the lore. And while the Phantom Pain does not severely punish the occasional kill, that is only provided you go about it like so. A silent single shot, quick and hidden. Anything else is asking for trouble. The actual problem with this is that if you want to be able to use the technology to its full potential, you need to play without using it at all in order to get the points needed to unlock and upgrade it. And speaking of underused, I should perhaps again mention the treatment of the companions. It would have been nice to see more missions designed around the two less utilized partners. As it is, there are only 2 or 3 missions built for the horse and none for the mech. And I still have no idea why the developers did not think it would be good to have at least one tank mission. You can obviously use them, so why not have a level devoted to one? So the gameplay loop can get tedious after a while. Same old loadout, crawl on the ground, restart checkpoint, upgrade something for a marginal improvement, repeat. The best way around it is to play the main missions passively and reserve the cool things for side quests and free roam. But after a while, that begins to feel like a demo version of the actual game. To be fair, the main quest does try to offer some variety in missions, wherein it varies not just locations and objective, but also enemy types and additional curveballs it throws at you mid-mission. This can, however, backfire times. This boss battle is against a group of special soldiers who are more metal than men. It sounds like a good opportunity to finally use my grenade launcher, except that it does virtually no damage at all. The actual weapon you want here is a sniper rifle. Because why use a power weapon just because it is fun and it makes sense to use it? It's not a big problem, but the unintuitive solution takes away the rush of first experiencing them. There is a mission with child soldiers with a side objective to extract a certain number to your base and consequently outside the war zone to safety. The stipulation, however, was that I could not use the so-called Fulton device since it put too much strain on their spine. So I ordered the delivery of a jeep. I loaded the jeep with as many of them as it could fit and I Fultoned the vehicle. However, by the time I was done with the objective, it had taken me so much time that my end mission score was a C-. So I can either do the moral thing or I can get not punished by the game for doing the moral thing. Alternatively, I could replay it later with an over-the-top science fiction device that frankly looks kind of dumb. Surely I would not have replayed it if it were merely fun. I need the bait of a better score to do it. Then again, I did not actually care to replay it. But you can probably tell that these flaws are not especially bad. None of them would make one to not play the game. If this were a test, there would be spelling errors, not mistaken answers. I've saved the biggest and actual flaw for last, and this major flaw is that the Phantom Pain is not finished. I do not mean unstable or badly coded, I mean quite literally not finished. It is missing the content of the final chapter. Chapter 2 ends on a cliffhanger, and then Chapter 3 is a handful of unique missions, and mostly missions from the previous 2 chapters but in hard mode, with a new Game Plus type enemy enhancements and stipulations and method and equipment. And while some of them can be fun, it really is no actual substitute for the rest of the game. And take a look at this new Game Plus bit of content. Imagine fighting a group of 4 science fiction snipers who can turn invisible and teleport around the map. They are also extremely accurate and insta-kill you the moment they spot you out of cover. In the second chapter, they are a fun boss fight. In the third chapter, however, they have a slight alteration to their health pool.
Next, stay on your guard.
They sniped 2 tanks to explosion by the time I was done with them, and if you decide not to fight them, you'll have your options limited later in the mission. The only way around this is to use a rifle that requires extreme grinding to unlock, or just throw 2 tanks at them and barely make it. And take a look at this side mission. If you make an armored car extremely tanky, shouldn't I also get a vehicle powerful enough to oppose it? Everything is extremely tough and extremely pink in New Game Plus. And yet, I had fun with it. A lot of the recorded content for this video is actually from the third chapter. Despite the often annoying imbalances, the core gameplay was just as solid. And the last level did feel like a last level. Not narratively the game remains unfinished, but the chapter offered a mind-blowing revelation near the end, and the final boss fight was hectic enough to feel like a fitting final boss fight, even though it was just a rehashed boss fight from the previous chapter. Now, make no mistake, the lack of a proper ending is a serious problem. Had the Phantom Pain not had so much cut content, it could have easily been a modern classic. As it is, an unfinished game cannot have that status. But it is so well done that it can be a very good product in spite of this shortcoming. None of these flaws should deter you from playing. It is not perfect, but it is still a top quality stealth game with a lot more to offer than just stealth. It is a one-of-a-kind experience. Phantom Pain is a unique game, and hence the video. It is unique in 2 ways. The first is in its quality. It is rare that a game can get so many things going for it, and while trying to do so many things at once. The design is authentic and yet diverse. There is solid realism as well as 90s type science fiction. The world is big and detailed, and yet the performance is spot on. Stealth is top-tier stealth gameplay with a wide array of options for a silent approach, and yet the shooting is so well done that combat can be just as fun. You can play it passively without making much use of its mechanics, or you can do impressive things like this player. The story is simultaneously serious and over the top, and while it can compare to gaming's greatest, anyone who has played it can agree that, at least, it is not an average story. And on top of all the core mechanics the gameplay does right, there are several smaller and not quite as noticeable elements it also gets equally as right. Compared to what I said about Far Cry 4, it is in a sense its opposite. Whereas Far Cry excelled not in any one mechanic, but worked very well as a whole, Phantom Pain seems to excel in just about every mechanic, and it does it so well that its flaws, whenever present, seem minuscule compared to the game's accomplishments. Yes, it demands that you grind, but the stealth is so solid you can play without using any equipment whatsoever. No, the story is not finished, but it is so capable of rousing the player's interest, and it offers so many reveals in the meantime, that its lack of a proper ending is mostly forgivable. And any minor setback is just that, a minor setback. The second point of uniqueness is the structure of the game itself. So far, we have not yet had a modern military game that is part science fiction and part historic semi-realism. If you want to play a game where you scout out an enemy outpost and then decide between sniping, sneaking, fighting, and bombing, and have an equal opportunity to have a good experience with each, there are not many games to choose from. And considering its quality, the Phantom Pain is likely your best choice. It is part Splinter Cell and part Delta Force, and while it wouldn't make a direct comparison to Far Cry as they have much different aims, it definitely does feel like a less open, more stealth-oriented response to Ubisoft's shooter. In many ways superior, in many ways not quite as consistently built, but ultimately one of a kind. Between the time I first played it and the time I'm writing this, I've not experienced anything quite like it. With the possible exception of people who have a strong aversion to third-person games or stealth genre, I really don't see a reason not to give it a chance. And perhaps just as importantly, I see a good reason to set the Phantom Pain as the standard for a good product. If only more games could be this solid, pun partially intended. And it could perhaps also serve as a lesson in planning too, because if you don't plan for an ending, what could have been an undisputed masterpiece just might end up as that. Thanks for watching. I'm obviously not going to end the video on that note. It was a mere meta joke which coincides with my negligence to think of a good conclusion. What I was going to say was, that missed extra mile on an otherwise amazing potential, and I do mean it. With the proper ending, this game could have been an instant classic and perhaps even a magnum opus. Without one, it is merely one of the best stealth games in existence. Let me just reiterate that the Phantom Pain is an impressive product. Though it was controversial at launch and it has its share of haters, I don't think anybody would dispute its quality. In fact, it was its exceptionally well done execution that inspired me to make this video in the first place. Take that as you will. In the meantime, I have been busy. Not exactly with the kinds of things that should have prevented me from making a video earlier, but cut me some slack. The stats are not exactly encouraging. With that said, to those of you who have subscribed in the meantime, and just as importantly those of you who have remained with the channel during the hiatus, I now officially renew your license to remain groovy. If you're interested in what I've been working on all along, or at least my major occupation, I have finally begun to publish my books. So far I have 2 ready, and there are between 2 and 4 others that should be released this year as well. So if you like my videos, you probably like my writing, because that's how scripts work. I write them. And with that, if any of my published content catches your eye, go ahead and give my literature a chance. You just might find literary enjoyment in gaming commentary. I've not officially promoted any of them yet, but I will soon. In the meantime, it would be of great help if you could give them a read. And if you can, please add a rating and a review. Those help tremendously. I've also opened a Discord server for this channel, so if you want to keep updated on future ongoing projects, or if you want to chat and possibly play something in the near future, go ahead and join. Links are in the description. So, thank you for watching the video to the end. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the content of this channel in the future. I wish you all a great rest of your day. I hope I will be seeing you sooner than the last time I said I would be seeing you soon, and let's hope this spring is better than, well, the last 2. Peace out, and take care, everybody.